At 6:47 a.m., I received a text message that turned my blood to ice. Fly home. Don't say anything to your mother and brother. 7 words. No name, no explanation. And 12 hours later, I was standing inside Bradley International Airport in Hartford, staring at a man in a gray suit holding a sign with my name on it. He wasn't alone. 2 Connecticut State Police officers stood beside him. What they showed me in that conference room, I don't remember falling. I only remember waking up on cold tile, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and a paramedic asking me to count backward from 10. That was 4 months ago. I still don't sleep through the night. But I need to tell you what happened, because what my own mother and brother tried to do to me, and what I did in response, changed who I am forever. Before I go on, if this story resonates with you, please consider liking and subscribing. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Tell me your city and your local time in the comments. My name is Willow Frell. I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how I stopped being someone's daughter and started becoming myself. Let me take you back. Rain. Cold November rain in Glastonbury. Tuesday, November 14th. I was 11 years old. I remember the date because I had a permission slip in my backpack for a field trip to the Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art. It cost $3. I needed a signature. Just $3. Just a signature. I walked into our kitchen holding that paper like it was something important. My mother, Margaret Frell, sat at the table with the phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was calm, flat, almost bored. It's done. She's leaving tonight. I didn't know who she was talking about. I didn't know she meant me. She hung up. She looked at me. Not like a mother looks at her child, more like someone noticing a stain on the counter. "Pack your things," she said. I smiled. I thought she meant the field trip. "You're leaving tonight." My brother Dean stood at the top of the stairs, 14 years old, leaning against the railing like he was watching television. He didn't say a word, didn't blink, didn't move. My mother opened the front door. Rain was hammering the porch. She handed me a black garbage bag, the thick yard kind, and said 4 words I will hear for the rest of my life. Go. Don't come back. No suitcase. No coat. No $3. No explanation. Just rain. I walked 3 miles that night, my sneakers filled with water by the second block. The garbage bag ripped near Hebron Avenue. My library book slid into a puddle. I didn't cry. Not yet. I knocked on my grandfather's door at 9:20 p.m. When Walter Ashford opened it, he didn't ask what happened. He knelt down on the wet porch, wrapped his arms around me, and said, "You're home now, little bird." That was the last time anyone in my family held me for 21 years. My grandparents' house on Hubbard Street was small, Cape Cod style, white shutters, vegetable garden out back. My grandmother, Rosemary, made pot roast every Sunday and braided my hair before school like nothing unusual had happened. They never forced me to explain. They never asked why. They simply made room. Margaret never called. Dean never wrote. No birthdays, no Christmas cards, nothing. It was as if I had been erased. When I was 13 and crying in the garage because a classmate asked why my mother didn't attend parent conferences, Grandpa set down his wrench and said something I didn't understand at the time. Someday you'll know why I'm saving the best for you. Saving what? I didn't ask. I was too busy being grateful I had a bed. There were small mysteries in that house. A man in a gray suit who visited every few months, closed-door meetings in Grandpa's study, low voices, paperwork. When I asked who he was, Grandpa said, "An old friend helping with paperwork." I believed him, because when you're a child who's been thrown out, you don't question safety. You protect it. My grandmother passed away when I was 16. A stroke. Quick. The house got quieter after that. Colder. But Grandpa kept going. He drove me to college tours, proofread my essays, and kept a locked oak box on the top shelf of his closet. I asked once what was inside. He smiled. Your future. He died 3 weeks before I started college, peacefully, one hand resting on a book about covered bridges. At the funeral, my mother walked in dressed in black from head to toe, silver cross around her neck, soft voice, tears on cue. She moved through the church like a grieving widow in a movie. She never looked at me. But Dean did. He leaned close in the pew and whispered, "Grandpa left everything to Mom. There's nothing for you." Then he smiled. After the service, the gray-suited man approached me in the parking lot. "Miss Frell, I'm Thomas Mercer. I was your grandfather's attorney for 30 years. He handed me a cream-colored envelope sealed with wax. "Your grandfather asked me to give this to you when the time is right." "When is that?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. "Not yet." I carried that envelope for 14 years, across dorm rooms, across cities, across a life I built without them. I studied computer science, worked nights, built a company from scratch. By 30, it was valued at $47 million. On paper, I was successful. Inside, I was still the girl walking in the rain with a garbage bag. Then my phone rang. "Willow," my mother said, "I have cancer. Early stage. Treatable." But she said the word sorry 4 times in 2 minutes. Then she said, "Let's be together before it's too late. A family trip. Hilton Hyde. Dean wants to apologize too." I said no. I hung up. My best friend Grace told me not to go. But here's the thing about being abandoned. Part of you stays 11 forever, still hoping someone opens the door and says they were wrong. So I said yes. 3 days. My own room. My own flight. What could 3 days hurt? The first warning came 20 minutes later. A text from an unknown number. "Be careful." 2 words. I deleted it. The second warning came at dinner in Hilton Hyde. Dean asked about my job, then about my home, then about my finances. "Family should invest together," he said. That night, another text. "Did your brother ask about money yet?" I didn't delete that one. I took a screenshot. The next morning, Dean placed a manila folder on the breakfast table. "Just a formality," he said. It was a trust document, a power of attorney disguised as a family consolidation agreement. It would give him control of every asset tied to the Ashford name, every single one. Mom had already signed. I said I needed time. He didn't like that. That night, I heard them whispering outside my door. "She doesn't know," my mother said. "Keep going." I stood in that bathroom shaking, and that's when my phone lit up again. "Fly home. Don't say anything to your mother and brother." At 4:37 a.m., I left without telling them. By 6:47 a.m., I was in the air. And by noon, I was walking toward a gray-suited man holding my name at Bradley International Airport. I didn't start looking for secrets. At 72 years old, you don't go digging through ghosts unless something forces your hand. For me, it was a leak. A small brown stain bloomed across the ceiling of my late husband's study just 3 weeks after we buried him. The insurance man said the pipe behind the wall had probably been slowly corroding for years. "These old houses hide things," he told me casually. He had no idea how right he was. The contractor needed access to the wall behind Raymond's built-in bookcase. The shelves had to come down. Every law journal, every framed commendation, every heavy volume he used to read in his leather chair by the window. I stood in the doorway and watched 2 young men dismantle the sanctuary my husband had guarded for 40 years. That study had always felt off limits, not because Raymond told me to stay out, he never raised his voice, but because it was his kingdom, his mind, his private fortress of order. I respected that. Now, as they removed the shelving, something slipped and clattered to the floor behind the drywall. A metal box. Not large, not ornate, just a dull gray lockbox, dust-covered, forgotten. The contractor held it up. "Ma'am, this yours?" I knew immediately it wasn't mine. Raymond handled all our documents. I never even knew where he kept the tax returns. The box was locked. I almost told them to throw it away. Instead, I said, "Leave it on the desk." After they left for the day, the house grew painfully quiet again, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. I carried the lockbox to the kitchen table. For nearly an hour, I simply stared at it. You see, after 48 years of marriage, you believe you know a man. Not just his habits, not just his temper, but his soul. Raymond had been steady, predictable, conservative. He wore gray suits and voted the same way every election. He never forgot an anniversary, never came home late without explanation. There were no scandals, no whispered phone calls, no perfume that wasn't mine. And yet that box felt heavy with something I didn't recognize. I found the spare key ring in his old desk drawer upstairs. Raymond labeled everything meticulously. If a key existed, he would have marked it. There was no label for this one. I tried 3 small keys before the 4th clicked. The sound of that lock turning felt louder than thunder. Inside were documents, not many, maybe 20 sheets of paper, a few photographs, and 1 sealed envelope addressed in Raymond's handwriting, not to me, to Elena Marquez. I read the name 3 times. It meant nothing. The photographs were older, faded around the edges. In one, Raymond stood beside a young woman outside what looked like a small courthouse. She was smiling, radiant, confident, not young like a granddaughter, young like a woman in her 30s. Raymond looked different, looser, softer, almost alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. The date on the back of the photograph stopped my breath. June 14th, 1998. We were married in 1976. I did the math twice, as if arithmetic could soften betrayal. He had been married to me for 22 years when that picture was taken. Under the photograph, in his handwriting, "For the day we can finally stop hiding." My hands began to tremble. I set the photograph down carefully, as if it might explode. The documents beneath were legal filings, property records, bank transfers, a deed to a small condominium in another city 2 hours from our home, purchased in 1997, paid in full, not in Raymond's name, in hers. I felt something unfamiliar rising in my chest. Not rage, not yet. Confusion. A deep, destabilizing confusion. You see, infidelity belongs to dramatic marriages, to shouting couples and slammed doors, to husbands who smell of whiskey and lies. Raymond and I were quiet people. We ate dinner at 6 p.m., we watched the evening news, we held hands in church. And now, suddenly, the timeline of my life felt perforated with holes I had never seen. I opened the envelope addressed to Elena. Inside was a letter dated 5 years ago. His handwriting was unmistakable. "Elena, I promised I would make things right. I'm working on the arrangements. Margaret must be protected. She cannot know. Not until I am certain you will be safe." Margaret, that's me, must be protected. Protected from what? Or protected from whom? The letter spoke of provisions, securing stability, and regret for the years lost. It ended with, "I will not let you be left with nothing. I swear it." Left with nothing. The words landed like a stone in my stomach. I flipped through the remaining papers. There were wire transfers, regular, structured, large enough to matter. Every quarter, for over 20 years. My pulse quickened. Our retirement had always seemed comfortable. Raymond handled investments. I trusted him completely. He'd worked in corporate litigation. Numbers and contracts were his language. Had he been dividing our life in two? 2 homes? 2 women? 2 versions of himself? Or was it something else? I stared again at the woman in the photograph, Elena Marquez. She did not look like a secret fling. She looked like someone he respected, someone he cherished, someone he planned a future with. "For the day we can finally stop hiding." I whispered the words aloud. Stop hiding from what? The contractor returned the next morning. I closed the box and carried it upstairs before he arrived. All day, while the hammering echoed through the house, I sat in the living room and replayed 48 years of marriage. There had been business trips, occasional weekends at conferences, a 3-month period in the late 90s when Raymond seemed distracted, distant. I had blamed stress. Now, each memory rearranged itself like puzzle pieces forming a different picture. I didn't cry. That surprised me. Instead, I felt cold, measured, alert. At my age, heartbreak is quieter. It doesn't scream, it calcifies. That evening, after the house fell silent again, I searched his desk for anything else. And that's when I found it. A second will. Not the one read at the attorney's office last week. This one was dated 2 years earlier, and it named an additional beneficiary, Elena Marquez. My heart began to pound, but that wasn't the part that made my knees buckle. There was a trust provision for a child, age 27, named Daniel Marquez. Relationship? Son. I lowered myself into Raymond's chair because the room had started to spin. Son. We had 1 daughter, just 1. We lost our second pregnancy at 5 months. Raymond held me while I wept for weeks. Or so I believed. 27 years old, which meant conceived while I was still attending PTA meetings, while I was planning our silver anniversary party, while I was believing in a man who apparently lived 2 parallel lives. I pressed my hand over my mouth to steady my breathing. I wasn't grieving a dead husband anymore. I was confronting a stranger. And the most terrifying part? The will I had seen at the attorney's office did not mention any son, which meant one of two things. Either Raymond had changed his mind, or someone had changed it for him. And that was the first moment I realized. This might not be just a story of betrayal. It might be a story of deception far deeper than infidelity. Because if there was a hidden son, and a hidden property, and hidden financial transfers, then what else had been buried behind those walls? I closed the study door that night for the first time in decades, and I locked it. Tomorrow, I decided, I would not call a friend. I would not confront the attorney. I would not crumble. Tomorrow, I would find Elena Marquez, and I would look into her eyes, because one of us had been living a lie, and I needed to know which one. I did not sleep that night, not because I was heartbroken, because I was thinking. There is a particular clarity that comes with age. At 72, panic wastes energy. I had none to spare. If Raymond had constructed another life, it had taken decades. Whatever truth existed would not collapse because I moved carefully. The condominium address listed in the documents was in Carmel by the Sea, 2 hours away. Close enough for conferences, far enough for secrets. I packed an overnight bag the next morning, not dramatically, just the essentials: a navy cardigan, sensible shoes, my medication organizer. I left a note for my daughter saying I needed time alone. That part wasn't a lie. The drive south felt surreal. I had traveled that highway dozens of times over the years. Vacations, anniversaries, coastal drives with Raymond. He always seemed relaxed there, lighter. Now I understood why. The condominium complex was modest but well-maintained. Pale stucco, bougainvillea climbing along wrought iron balconies, the kind of place purchased for quiet living, not ostentation. I sat in the car for nearly 10 minutes before stepping out. You must understand, I wasn't walking toward a rival. I was walking toward evidence. Unit 3B. My hand did not shake when I knocked. Footsteps approached, slow, measured. The door opened. She was older than the photograph. Of course she was. Time had passed. Her hair, once dark, was now streaked with silver. Fine lines traced the corners of her eyes, but it was unmistakably the same woman, Elena Marquez. She looked at me with polite confusion. Yes? Up close, I saw something else. Grief. Fresh. "I'm Margaret Whitaker," I said evenly, "Raymond's wife." Her face drained of color. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she stepped aside. "You should come in." The living room was tidy, sparse, no excess decoration. A framed photograph stood on a side table, Raymond, older, standing beside a young man in a graduation gown. Daniel. The resemblance was undeniable. Same jawline, same posture. I sat on the edge of the sofa. Elena remained standing. "When did you find out?" she asked quietly. The question startled me. "Yesterday." She closed her eyes briefly, as if absorbing a blow she had anticipated. "I told him this would happen," she murmured quietly. That sentence rearranged something inside me. "You knew about me," I said. She looked at me then, directly, not defensively, not arrogantly. Yes. The simplicity of it hurt more than denial would have. "For how long?" I asked. "From the beginning." My spine stiffened. "Then you knowingly—" "No," she interrupted gently. "It wasn't like that. There are moments when anger seeks ignition. I was ready to let it burn. But something in her tone, not guilt, not defiance, stopped me. She sat across from me. Raymond told me the truth the day we met, that he was married, that he had a daughter, that he had responsibilities. And that didn't deter you?" Her hands clasped together in her lap. "I didn't intend to fall in love with him." The words felt absurdly ordinary, as if this were a college affair, as if we weren't two elderly women dissecting a lifetime. "You had a child," I said flatly. "Yes." The air thickened. "He wanted to leave," she continued softly. That struck me like a slap. "He told you that?" "He said he would never abandon you financially, but he said your marriage had become companionette, that you deserved stability, not scandal." I almost laughed. Companionette? After 48 years? After building a family? After losing a pregnancy? I deserved stability, not truth. "He said you were fragile," Elena added carefully. My eyes snapped to hers. "Fragile?" "He said you depended on him, that revealing everything would devastate you." There it was. Not protection, control. Raymond had not preserved my peace. He had curated my ignorance. "And Daniel?" I asked casually. "He knew Raymond was his father," she replied, "but Raymond insisted on distance. Publicly, he was a family friend. Privately, he paid for everything: education, living expenses, this condo." I remembered the quarterly transfers. "For 27 years?" I asked. "Yes." "And you accepted that arrangement?" Her expression shifted, pain mingled with resignation. "You think I didn't ask for more?" she said. "You think I didn't want legitimacy? I raised a boy who watched his father leave every Sunday evening." That sentence landed heavier than accusation. I looked at the photograph again. Daniel looked proud, hopeful. "He died angry," said Elena suddenly. The room stilled. "What?" "Raymond," she clarified. "The last time he visited, he told me he was rewriting the will. He said he was finally going to acknowledge Daniel publicly." My pulse accelerated. "I saw an earlier version," I said slowly. "Daniel was included." "Yes, that's what he told us. But the will presented after his death did not mention him." Elena's face tightened. Then something changed. We sat in silence, the implications expanding between us. "Who handled his estate?" she asked carefully. "My longtime attorney." "What's his name?" "Harold Bennett." Her lips pressed together. "That's impossible." "Why?" "Because Raymond fired Harold 6 months before he died." The words hit with surgical precision. "He told me he'd hired a new firm in San Jose, said he needed fresh oversight." My mind recalibrated. At the funeral, Harold seemed composed, professional. He presented the will with routine solemnity. Had I questioned it? No. I had been grieving and trusting. "So you're saying," I said slowly, "the man who presented the will was no longer his attorney." "That's what Raymond told me." A chill crept along my arms. This was no longer about betrayal. This was about manipulation, perhaps fraud. "Does Daniel know I'm here?" I asked carefully. She hesitated. "He's at work." "What does he do?" "Public defender." Of course he was. Raymond's son defending strangers in court while remaining legally invisible in his own father's estate. "I need to see the documents you have, and you need to see the ones Raymond left with us," Elena said carefully. She stood and retrieved a folder from a cabinet. Inside were copies of trust drafts, emails from Raymond referencing changes, appointment confirmations with a law office in San Jose, dated 3 months before his death. I felt something inside me crystallize. If Raymond had intended to acknowledge Daniel, if he changed representation, if the will I saw was outdated, then someone had benefited from reverting to the earlier version, and I suddenly understood something I hadn't wanted to consider. My daughter. She adored her father. She also relied heavily on the inheritance he described. Could she have known? The thought felt disloyal, but logic demanded examination. "Elena," I said evenly, "did Raymond ever express fear?" She frowned slightly. "Yes," she admitted, "toward the end." "Of what?" He said someone close to him was pressuring him about finalizing things quickly. I assumed it meant you. I knew nothing. Her gaze sharpened. Then who? The silence that followed felt electric. For the first time since opening that lockbox, my grief transformed into resolution. Raymond had deceived me, but someone else might have exploited him, and that I would not forgive. I think, I said carefully, we may have a common problem. Elena studied me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Two women, bound not by rivalry, but by the same dead man's unfinished truth, and possibly by the same living enemy. Daniel arrived at the condominium just before sunset. When the door opened and he stepped inside, I felt the air change. There are some truths that require no DNA test. He carried Raymond's posture, shoulders squared, chin slightly lifted, as if bracing for argument before one began. His hair was darker, his expression sharper, but the resemblance was undeniable. He stopped short when he saw me. "This is Margaret," Elena said gently, "your father's wife." The word father seemed to land heavily between us. Daniel studied me, not hostile, not warm, assessing. "I wondered when this would happen," he said evenly. His voice was steady, professional. "You knew about me?" I said. "Yes." The symmetry of secrets felt almost grotesque. "I'm sorry," he added, after a pause. "Not for existing, but for the circumstances." I nodded once. "That makes two of us." Elena explained what I had found, the earlier will, the absence of Daniel's name in the probated document, Raymond's mention of firing Harold Bennett. Daniel's expression shifted from composure to focus. "Do you have a copy of the will that was entered into probate?" "Yes." "And you're certain it was dated after the draft including me?" "Yes." He ran a hand over his jaw, thinking. "In California, the most recent validly executed will governs. So if your copy naming me predates the probated version, then on its face, the newer one controls. But, I pressed. But if the newer one was revoked before death or executed under improper circumstances, it can be challenged." Elena leaned forward. "What about the attorney? If Raymond terminated Harold Bennett and retained new counsel, then Bennett should not have had authority to file anything," Daniel replied, "unless your father reinstated him." "He didn't," Elena said firmly. "He was furious with him." I felt something tighten in my chest. Anger was easier than grief. "Then we need proof," I said. "Proof he changed representation." Daniel nodded. "Engagement letters, billing records, email correspondence." "Would a new firm keep those?" I asked. "Absolutely." He pulled out his phone. "What was the name of the San Jose firm?" Elena handed him the appointment confirmations. Daniel scanned them. "Whitmore and Klein," he read aloud. The name meant nothing to me, but within 24 hours it would. The next morning, Daniel drove us to San Jose. The offices of Whitmore and Klein were modern, glass walls, steel accents, clean lines, not the traditional oak-paneled aesthetic Raymond favored. We were shown into a conference room. A woman in her late 40s entered, composed, precise. "I'm Laura Whitmore," she said. "How can I assist?" Daniel introduced himself first. "I believe your firm represented my father, Raymond Whitaker, prior to his death." Whitmore's expression shifted slightly. "Yes," she said carefully, "we did." My pulse accelerated. "Can you confirm the dates of representation?" Daniel asked. She glanced at a tablet. "We were retained 7 months ago. Representation terminated 3 weeks before Mr. Whitaker's passing." "Terminated?" I asked sharply. "Yes." "By whom?" Daniel pressed. "By Mr. Whitaker himself." The words struck like ice water. "He reinstated his former counsel?" Whitmore hesitated. We were informed he chose to return to long-standing advisory support. That phrase felt rehearsed. Did he execute a new will under your firm's supervision? Daniel asked. Yes. My heart pounded. And what did it contain? Whitmore paused. I cannot disclose specifics without proper authorization from the executor of the estate. Who is listed as executor? I asked. She studied me carefully. Your daughter, Ms. Rebecca Whittaker. The room went silent. Rebecca, my only child. Daniel spoke first. The will admitted to probate lists no co-beneficiaries beyond Margaret and Rebecca. It excludes me entirely. Whitmore's brows drew together. That is not consistent with the instrument we prepared. The words detonated. Elena inhaled sharply. Whitmore continued, choosing each word precisely. The will executed in our office included a trust allocation to Daniel Marquez. Daniel's jaw tightened. And the executor? He asked. Mr. Whittaker initially named an independent fiduciary. However, she hesitated. A subsequent amendment requested substitution of his daughter as executor. Was that amendment executed in your presence? Daniel asked. No. It was delivered to us already signed. We advised caution. Why? I pressed. Because the signature appeared strained. My stomach dropped. Strained? I repeated. It did not resemble prior exemplars precisely. We recommended medical confirmation of capacity. And did you receive it? Daniel asked. No. Why not? Because Mr. Whittaker terminated our services shortly thereafter. The silence thickened. You believed the amendment might be improper, Daniel summarized. Whitmore chose diplomacy. We believed further verification was prudent. I felt the world tilting. Rebecca had handled many of Lanham's final appointments. I had been overwhelmed by hospital visits, medications, hospice arrangements. Had she isolated him? No, that was paranoia. But facts are facts. Who delivered the amendment? Daniel asked. Whitmore consulted her records. It was couriered, signed, witnessed by 2 individuals not affiliated with our firm. Names? She read them aloud. Neither meant anything to me, but Daniel's expression changed. I know one of them, he said quietly. From where? I asked. From campaign finance litigation. He's been disbarred once. The room seemed to shrink. Whitmore folded her hands. If there is concern regarding undue influence or forgery, probate litigation may be appropriate. Undue influence. The legal phrase for manipulation of a vulnerable person. My husband had been ill, on pain medication, fatigued, dependent. Rebecca had moved back home temporarily to help. I had been grateful. God help me, I had been grateful. We returned to Carmel that evening. I did not go home. Instead, I booked a small hotel room overlooking the coast. For the first time since Raymond's death, I cried. Not for him, for the possibility that my daughter inherited more than his intelligence. Perhaps she had inherited his capacity for deception. But this was different. This was not a parallel life born of emotional weakness. If true, this was deliberate, calculated, illegal. At 72, I never imagined I would consider legal action against my own child. Yet by dawn, clarity had settled. I would not accuse, I would not speculate. I would investigate. And if Rebecca had altered her father's final wishes, then she would answer for it. Because betrayal by a husband fractures the heart, but betrayal by a child threatens the foundation of everything. And I would not let this family's legacy end in quiet corruption. Tomorrow, I would go home, and I would look my daughter in the eye, not as a grieving widow, but as a woman who now understood exactly what was at stake. The next morning, I returned to the house I had shared with Raymond for decades. The familiar creak of the front door felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves were bracing for what was to come. I had spent the night rehearsing words I wasn't even sure I wanted to say. The truth was a knife I had to wield delicately, lest it cut not just the guilty, but everyone it touched. Rebecca was in the kitchen, the sunlight streaming across her face, unknowing. She looked up when I entered, a faint smile that faltered when she saw the set of my shoulders. "Mom," she said, cautiously, "you look tired. Did you sleep here?" "No," I said. My voice was steady. "I stayed at a hotel. I needed distance to think." Her brow furrowed. "About Dad?" "Yes," I said, and that simple acknowledgement seemed to shift the air in the room. I sat at the table, folding my hands in front of me. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something important, something about your father's final weeks." She straightened, alert. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "Rebecca, you handled many of his affairs when he was sick, scheduling, finances, appointments, correct?" "Yes," she said, a little too quickly. "I was helping. I didn't want him to struggle." "I understand," I said softly, "but I received information yesterday that raises serious questions about a will amendment, an amendment that changed the executor and potentially excluded others who were meant to benefit. Do you know what I'm referring to?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. There was a flash there, and defensiveness I hadn't seen before. I think so," she said carefully. "Mom, I only did what I thought Dad wanted. I managed things for him. That's all." I leaned forward. "Rebecca, this is not about intention. It's about legality and authenticity. Did you deliver an amendment to Whitmore and Klein yourself, or direct someone else to do so?" Her hands gripped the edge of the table. I handled the courier. Dad approved it." "Approved it how?" My voice rose, but I forced it to remain calm. "Did he sign it in your presence? Did he fully understand it?" She looked away. "Mom, he was in pain. He trusted me. He signed what I brought. He said it was fine." Daniel's words echoed in my mind. Undue influence is not casual. I saw now that I had to press further. "Rebecca, this is serious. Whitmore suggested there were irregularities, signs that the amendment may not have been executed with proper capacity verification. Your father was vulnerable. Were you aware of that? That any oversight could be considered undue influence?" Rebecca swallowed hard, her composure slipping. "Mom, I only wanted to help him. He loved me. He trusted me. Everything I did was to protect him, not hurt him." I reached across the table. "I don't doubt your love, but love does not negate responsibility. You had a duty to ensure that any changes were valid and upboard. Do you understand that?" She nodded, tears brimming. "Yes, I understand." I paused, the enormity of the moment pressing down on me. "Rebecca, Daniel will help us review everything, every document, every signature, every communication. I need you to cooperate fully. If there's anything unusual, anything that could be considered invalid, it must be addressed immediately." She nodded again, more firmly this time. "I will." The room was heavy with unspoken words. I wanted to ask more, demand confessions, hear the truth of her thoughts during those final weeks. But I held back. This confrontation was the beginning, not the conclusion. Later that afternoon, Daniel arrived at the house with a stack of documents and a folder labeled Whitmore and Klein Records. He looked at me, eyes sharp. Margaret, I've gone through the files. There's enough here to request a formal capacity review and potentially challenge the amendment, but it must be done delicately. We're not talking about a typical probate dispute. This involves family, trust, and reputation. I understand. I never wanted this to be public, but we cannot ignore irregularities, not for Dad's sake, not for ours. Daniel nodded. I'll draft a plan. First, we confirm all documents are genuine. Then we proceed step by step, quietly, legally, without unnecessary confrontation. If Rebecca truly acted without malice, this can be resolved. If not, he didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need him to. I spent the evening in the study, going through Raymond's personal files, letters, and diaries. Every detail seemed to carry weight, every signature, every note, a potential clue to the truth. I found one letter addressed to me in Raymond's familiar hand. The ink had faded, but the words were clear. If anything happens to me, Margaret, I trust you to uphold fairness and integrity. Protect what is right. Do not let love or loyalty blind judgment. The letter made my chest tighten. Raymond had anticipated this, seen it coming. I felt a surge of resolve. I would honor his wishes, even if it meant standing against my own daughter. The next days were a blur of document review, consultations with forensic handwriting experts, and private meetings with Daniel. Rebecca attended reluctantly, mostly silent, watching every interaction. The more we dug, the more inconsistencies emerged. Courier logs that didn't align, witness statements that contradicted themselves, and timing that seemed almost too convenient. One evening, I confronted her again. Rebecca, these discrepancies cannot be ignored. I need to know, did anyone influence you, pressure you? She hesitated, then whispered, Mom, I didn't want to. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting Dad from confusion, from lawyers, from the estate being mishandled. I softened, but only slightly. Protecting him doesn't give anyone the right to override his intentions. That's not protection, that's control, and it can be legally challenged. Do you understand? She nodded, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. At that moment, I realized the complexity of the situation. This wasn't just about legality, it was about love, loyalty, and the blurred line between protection and manipulation. It was about how grief could warp perception, how responsibility could be mistaken for entitlement. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Margaret, we're proceeding carefully. Every step is documented. We'll approach this methodically. No emotional leaps, no assumptions. I exhaled, feeling both exhausted and strangely empowered. For weeks I had felt trapped between mourning and anger. Now I had a path forward, a structured legal route to uncover the truth, restore fairness, and honor Raymond's memory. That night I sat alone in the study, staring at the photograph of Raymond on the desk. His eyes, familiar and wise, seemed to meet mine. I will do this right, Raymond, even if it hurts, even if it destroys illusions. You trusted me to protect what is right. I will. Outside, the wind off the coast whispered through the trees. Inside, the quiet hum of the house felt like a heartbeat, steady, patient, and waiting for justice, waiting for truth, waiting for the inevitable reckoning that was coming. I knew one thing with certainty. Nothing would be easy. Family bonds would be tested, loyalties questioned, and hearts broken. But if the law, evidence, and conscience aligned, the truth would prevail. And I would be ready. The morning sunlight barely penetrated the gray clouds that hung low over the coast. I could feel the tension in the house like a physical weight pressing against the walls and even the air itself. Today was the day we would confront everything: the documents, the discrepancies, and most importantly, Rebecca's choices. There was no turning back. Daniel arrived early, carrying the compiled evidence. His expression was somber but determined. Margaret, we've organized everything chronologically. Every courier receipt, signature verification, witness statement. There are clear patterns of undue influence. We have the legal footing we need. I nodded. Then it's time. Rebecca was already in the living room when we arrived. She looked smaller than usual, fragile, yet still carrying the stubbornness that had always defined her. Her hands clutched a cup of coffee like a lifeline. "Mom? Daniel? What's all this?" she asked, voice trembling. I took a deep breath. "Rebecca, it's time we go through the documents. All of them. Every amendment, every note, every signature. I want full transparency. We owe this to your father." Her face paled. You don't believe me?" "It's not about belief," I said steady. "It's about truth. Intentions alone do not protect us from consequences. Let's start." The hours that followed were painstaking. Daniel led the review, pointing out inconsistencies, irregularities, and suspicious timing. Every courier log that didn't match, every witness statement that wavered under scrutiny, the puzzle became undeniable. Rebecca's composure broke midway. She clutched her head, tears falling freely. I didn't know it would be like this. I only wanted to help. I thought I was protecting him." "Rebecca," I said gently but firmly, "protecting him does not mean rewriting his intentions. You had a duty to him, not just as a daughter, but as a witness and executor. You failed in that duty, whether you meant to or not." She cried silently, the weight of realization pressing down on her. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I never wanted this to happen." "I know," I whispered, "but love without accountability can be dangerous. You can't undo the past, but you can take responsibility now." The climax of this confrontation came when Daniel presented the final piece, a notarized statement from Raymond's personal physician confirming he had diminished capacity in the final weeks. The amendment Rebecca had delivered had been signed during this period. The legal implications were unavoidable. Rebecca sank into the sofa, shaking. "I never thought about that. I didn't think." "I understand," I said softly, placing a hand on hers. "And now you understand too. This is why we have to correct it, not to punish you, but to honor your father's true wishes." After hours of review, deliberation, and emotional confrontation, Rebecca finally admitted the truth. She had acted out of fear, love, and an overwhelming desire to control the chaos surrounding her father's illness. She had crossed a line without realizing it. The path forward was clear. With Daniel's guidance, we initiated a formal challenge to the amendment. The corrected will, which reflected Raymond's original intentions, would be reinstated. Rebecca would not face criminal charges, but she had to acknowledge her role and cooperate fully with the process. The aftermath was emotionally draining, but ultimately healing. Rebecca issued a heartfelt apology, not just to me, but to the entire family. It was raw, unguarded, and sincere. She admitted her mistakes, accepted accountability, and promised to rebuild trust. As for me, I felt a mixture of sorrow, relief, and vindication. Raymond's legacy had been preserved, his true intentions honored. The family, though shaken, had a chance to mend. In the weeks that followed, Rebecca and I began to rebuild our relationship. It was tentative at first, fragile as glass, but there was a foundation now: honesty, acknowledgement, and accountability. The tension that had haunted every conversation, every gathering, slowly dissipated. I often sat alone in the study reflecting on the ordeal. Grief had a way of revealing character, and crisis exposed the truth. The experience taught me that love, when mixed with fear and control, could blind even the most well-intentioned. It also taught me that justice and compassion were not mutually exclusive. One could pursue the truth without destroying those we loved. One evening, I found the letter Raymond had left me again. I read it slowly, savoring each word. If anything happens to me, Margaret, I trust you to uphold fairness and integrity. Protect what is right. Do not let love or loyalty blind judgment. I smiled softly, a tear sliding down my cheek. I had fulfilled his request, not perfectly, not without pain, but with the steadfast commitment he had asked for. As I looked out the window at the setting sun over the ocean, I felt a quiet closure. The storm had passed. The truth had emerged. The family, though scarred, could begin to heal. And I had learned a lesson that would stay with me forever. Love must always be tempered with honesty, and loyalty must never override integrity. The house was still, except for the distant crash of waves against the cliffs below. In that silence, I felt Raymond's presence, guiding, approving, and watching over the family he had loved so fiercely. And in that moment, I knew that despite the pain, despite the betrayal, we had survived. We had survived, and we had done right.